Hello, and welcome to Spilling the Tea, the podcast where we dive deep into the cutting edge of confidential computing and AI. I'm Lisa Loud from Secret Network, and I'll be your host today. Now, this isn't your typical podcast. Here, we explore the real tech that's shaping the next wave of Web3, from zero-knowledge proofs, trusted execution environments, to the frontier of privacy-preserving machine learning and AI. So welcome. And today I am happy to have a guest who embodies the spirit of Web3 in his work and vision and how he got to where he is today. Auryn Macmillan is co-founder of Gnosis Guild, the applied research studio and venture builder behind Zodiac and Enclave. A self-taught engineer and mechanism designer, he previously worked with Gnosis and Colony and founded CLR.fund, contributing to early experiments in governance and coordination. He now leads the development of Zodiac as an operating system for programmable custody, and Enclave as infrastructure for verifiable confidential computation. So welcome, Auryn. Happy to have you.
Thanks, Lisa. Really great to be here.
So, Auryn, what first drew you into mechanism design and really decentralized coordination? And as a follow-on to that, how did your self-taught engineering background shape your approach?
Good question. I guess I for just about as long as I can remember, have been a tinkerer or kind of hacker. I've been pulling apart computers since I was 10 and attempting to put them back together, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. But yeah, I don't know. I grew up in an environment where I had some great access to electronics, computers, and I guess my dad was encouraged this as a pastime, as a hobby, so grew up in this hacking kind of tinkering environment, and it's just permeated, I think, my approach to life in general. I before getting into Web3, I actually played basketball professionally for many years, and so my underlying kind of passion for engineering, for mechanism design was always something that I did kind of on the side while playing basketball. And it was, I think, the falling down the Bitcoin rabbit hole in 2013, and then discovering the idea of Ethereum shortly after, is what really, I think, captivated me and forced that side of me to start kind of taking the forefront or more and more of my mental bandwidth. And in particular, the thing that really captivated me about Ethereum was this idea of decentralized autonomous corporations at the time, the idea of being able to encode organizational logic as a program, in addition to or as an alternate to legal encoding, and then this kind of idea of being able to, by virtue of that, radically lower the barrier to entry to all kinds of organizational structures, and potentially also like blow out the ceiling on the scale that human organization can reach. So that was the real, I guess, catalyst for me finally, making the jump out of sports and into something more technical. But again, I've had this kind of ongoing background of being just a hobbyist, generally interested in tinkering with.
Yeah. I'm always interested in seeing how people ended up in Web3 because a lot of people have very unusual journeys to get to this industry where, it's very innovative and very non-standard. But you're the first person that I've met who came from a background in basketball. So that's fascinating. How do you think, not on the script, but how do you think, what lessons from basketball did you bring into Web3?
Yeah, I think, I mean, sports in general forces a work ethic that translates well into to just about anything else. The ability to set a goal, set a series of incremental steps towards that goal, and then work relentlessly towards it. That, I mean, works as well for basketball as it does for software engineering. And so I think that's translated well. The ability to work well as part of a team, to communicate well, communicate constantly and effectively translates really well. And then I think just I guess there's a confidence element maybe as well, where I know a lot of people, particularly once you get to the point of getting onto podcasts or speaking on stage or anything like that, a lot of people struggle with that side of things.
You're used to
Yeah, I
that.
think this is right. Exactly.
Mhm.
Speaking on stage is no more intimidating to getting in front of a crowd and playing a game with people booing you and all this kind of stuff. So it's, yeah, I think that's translated well.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a performance, when you're playing for a crowd. So, I can see that. But, yeah, I'm fascinated by your journey. I wanna hear more about it. But let's talk about, Zodiac for a second because, um, I feel like DAOs have evolved over the past few years, not as much as we thought they would maybe, but Zodiac has become a foundational operating system for modular DAO tooling. So, that's where we are today. But what problem did Zodiac originally aim to solve, and how has that evolved?
Yeah, so Zodiac itself was somewhat emergent from uh, the development we were doing internally at Gnosis at the time, essentially designing and implementing the Gnosis DAO. Through the process of that design and implementation, we arrived at what we felt were uh, best standards for modular on-chain entities, and in particular, entities that had a reasonable expectation of growing and evolving over time. We had noticed that a lot of the previous generation of uh, tooling for on-chain entities was very static in that it set up an account structure, an organizational structure that had very little room to grow and adapt over time. And this forced some really cumbersome migration patterns when the organization inevitably did grow and did change and did have kind of different requirements emerge over time. And so we wanted to plan for more of a dynamic organization that could grow and adapt without having to have these really painful migrations. Um, so that was a big part of what shaped the design for Zodiac, and this need for modularity. Um, and then, yeah, Zodiac itself as a standard was essentially the result of that body of work in designing the Gnosis DAO. The two most widely used modules from Zodiac are the Reality module, which is the uh, essentially Oracle module that brings off-chain decision-making logic into verifiable on-chain execution. And so that's what's used by the Gnosis DAO and then a whole bunch of other DAOs. And then the other is this roles module, which is a module for really fine-grained, granular role-based access control, bolted onto a safe, and essentially allows you to set up very nuanced access control structures in systems that otherwise have very naive, basic access control structures. And allows, again, for this to change over time. And the original use case we were targeting for this was treasury management, non-custodial treasury management for, again, the Gnosis DAO, wanting to have the treasury management team be able to take care of the pool of funding that the Gnosis DAO was responsible for, but not give that treasury management team unilateral access to the funds, right? Allow them to do DeFi things without being able to abscond with the funds. And this kind of kickstarted a whole ecosystem now of non-custodial treasury managers built on top of this stack.
Hmm. Makes sense, and that is actually brilliant because if everything is hard-coded in the DAO in a smart contract that's immutable and unchangeable, then as you run into problems, what are you going to do? So fascinating. And I know that DAOs have really struggled to become effective. Maybe that's more of a human problem than a technical problem. But if we have the ability to change the tech to match the human problems, then we're likely to be more successful, I assume.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. In large part, I think DAOs. I don't know that DAOs have necessarily been any less effective than other types of organizations. I think what they have done is been more public about it. A lot of the inefficiencies and failures of traditional organizations happen behind closed doors, and so aren't there for everyone to scrutinize. Um, but not to say that there is not a bunch of issues with DAOs and on-chain organizations in general. But yeah, that doing everything or a large portion of your operations out in the open definitely invites scrutiny, which is
Yeah.
ultimately a good thing.
Yeah, you're very wise. I had a number of jobs with small companies, and then I got my job with Apple. And really, when I went to Apple, I had very optimistic expectations. I was like, oh, finally, I'm going to go to a real company that works properly. And when I got inside and realized, oh, it's just bigger. It's just
Right,
bigger dysfunction. And I
right,
worked
right,
for
right.
Oracle as well, and PayPal and Intuit, and every company that I worked for, once I got inside, I realized it's all dysfunctional. So, very wise. Yes. It's all, but it's behind closed doors, and DAOs are just more public and transparent. So, good point. So, let's shift a little bit to verifiable confidential computation. Can you explain that to a non-technical audience and explain why it's important and really why it's essential for the future of decentralized systems?
Yeah, I've had a really hard time explaining this in a accessible way, but I'll try. It's a mouthful in and of itself. Just the kind of name of it. But yeah, so we're working on this protocol Enclave, looking to solve for this class of problems where systems benefit from being able to aggregate information from many private sources and then produce a verifiable output. And I think maybe the easiest way to talk about this in a less technical way is just to give some concrete examples of the types of applications that we're talking about and why it's important for what the kind of trade-offs and compromises are in designing for these systems. So what ultimately inspired Enclave originally, what's the problem we were looking to solve for was secret ballot voting. Again, thinking about it from this governance perspective, both on-chain and off-chain, um, secret ballots are a cornerstone of every worthwhile democracy in the world, um, because a secret and critically receipt-free ballot um, is a very strong protection against collusion, coercion, bribery, which fundamentally denature the results of a democratic outcome or a democratic election. Um, and so every voting system, or the vast majority of voting systems on chain currently are fully public. You can see everyone who voted. You can see how they voted. Obviously, there's a layer of pseudonymity, but that's tenuous, and in a lot of cases, identities are publicly known. And so, um, yeah, because of that, we've seen a lot of very explicit examples of bribery and collusion, things like the sellout DAO for Moloch and curve gauges being this kind of explicit bribery mechanism. Um, and then obviously beyond that, there's this layer of much less obvious bribery, collusion, coercion going on in a less public way. Um, and so, yeah, ultimately we were looking to solve for this voting privacy problem. I had been working in a previous project, ClearFund, um, with a stack called Macy, the minimal anti-collusion infrastructure, which um, attempted to solve for this problem by doing voting inside of a ZK circuit. And essentially, it had this fundamental trust property where one party, the coordinator, could see, it would necessarily needed to see all of the votes in order to be able to produce a proof of the tally. And so our realization there was that this is fundamentally untenable for a lot of users to have this one trusted actor, or for your trust model to be an honest coordinator. So we wanted to try to figure out how to distribute trust in that coordinator. Arrive then at an architecture combining some other cryptographic methods, fully homomorphic encryption and multi-party computation alongside of ZKPs, to then allow us to radically distribute trust in that coordinator-like entity while maintaining the verifiability and privacy properties. And then I think the real light bulb moment around Enclave was realizing that voting is just one of a whole class of these applications. And so a good example of another type of application here would be a sealed bid auction. The literature on auctions typically refers to victory auctions or sealed bid second price auctions as the most economically efficient auction type. But again, this is an application where historically it's required a trusted auctioneer, someone who can see all of the bids, compute the outcome, and then reveal the winner and the price they pay. But that puts trust in the privacy and integrity of the system on that auctioneer. And so, what we are able to do with Enclave, and what we set out to do is take these types of applications and remove, or at least very broadly distribute the trust in that trusted party for ensuring privacy of those inputs. Beyond that, there's a whole bunch of other use cases around private data analytics, collaborative research, collaborative risk scoring and credit scoring, and essentially this whole class of problems where you have multiple private inputs.
Yeah. And that's a good way to explain it, is by using examples of what happens if you don't have the verifiably confidential computation, right? These are the things that go wrong, basically, things that don't work without it. So I think what you're saying is that it's essential. It's essential for a lot of, it's like an assumption that we have in our Web 2 world and lives, that if it's missing, things just don't work anymore. But it's hard to identify those things because we're so used to having secret ballots, for example, and private auctions where you can't see other bids. So it requires explaining this is what breaks without it.
Right. Well, and I think the other thing is that we, outside of Web3 and in more traditional applications, we're kind of used to trust assumptions that are institutionally guaranteed, right? Or trust assumptions that are, there's some trusted third party, but the reality of that is that is not applicable to many use cases, or is untenable for many use cases, particularly as you start to get beyond a certain scale of participants, or a certain scale of essentially value at stake in the outcomes of these types of decisions. And having a party that can be corrupted and kind of break integrity makes those systems untenable. And so voting is a great example of this. There's a reason why the state of the art is write your vote on a piece of paper and drop it in a box and shake the box, right? Because
Hard to corrupt.
Yeah, exactly. But the trade-off there is that you lose verifiability, right? You as a voter, you cannot verify that your vote was actually counted. You cannot verify that the tally is the correct tally of all of the votes cast by registered voters. And I think maybe the other way that we've started to try to communicate around this is this fundamental trilemma, right? You have verifiability, confidentiality, and aggregation as these three corners on this trilemma. And essentially you can pick two out of those three things, and you must compromise on the third. And so paper ballots are an example there where you're choosing confidentiality, but making this compromise on verifiability. And in our case, in the case of Enclave, I think what we've aimed to do is come up with a best-in-class compromise on the confidentiality side. So we get verifiability and aggregation, and then on the confidentiality side, we've distributed this amongst a large
Yeah.
pool of
Right.
staked node operators.
Right. With MPC. Yeah, it makes sense. So if the confidentiality and verifiability and aggregation compromise is we consider that solved, what do you see as the biggest failure mode other than that in DAO decision making today?
Yeah, well, I would be hesitant to say solved. I think that's a very
But if
like
we just say,
final
let's just
state,
say
but
that it's
yeah, yeah,
solved.
yeah.
Now, what's
Yeah,
the
well,
next problem?
yeah. So I think, I mean, in terms of DAO decision making, I I think that the most interesting design space that's being explored at the moment is around market-based decision making, Futaki, which is again one of the things that got me really into and excited about Web3 and Ethereum as a space. That's why I worked with Gnosis for many years. Because of the focus on prediction markets and the intent to push into Futaki. And so I'm very excited to see that starting to have a resurgence. You see MetaDAO with a really interesting funding model for their launchpad, and then seeing projects like Sia and Futaki.fi starting to I guess explore this as a governance model again in the Ethereum ecosystem. And so I think, yeah, that's something I'm very excited about as a decision making tool in Ethereum. And I think maybe just to give a little bit more context, I think one of the biggest failure modes or issues that DAOs have had with decision making is um, trying to have too granular decision making happen at essentially the top layer of governance, and not being able to essentially throwing out the last few hundred years of firm optimization. Right, firms are very efficient at doing business because they have again over the last couple of hundred years of development a hierarchical decision making and responsibility structure has proven itself to be again efficient, um, and so I think what I'd really love to see is market based decision making at the top layer of on chain organizations, of DAO like entities, um, that essentially help to shape that hierarchy, but not make day-to-day decisions. Um, and yeah, I think this will help. This will really help help DAOs to start to, I guess, achieve more of the operational efficiency that you see out of traditional organizations, while distributing trust and distributing ownership in a broad and kind of Web3 native way.
Right. Okay, thank you. So I want to come back to a little bit about your journey, as we talked about at the beginning. And you are someone who came from a non Web3 space into the Web3 governance space. What do you think when you see other traditional, maybe founders from Web2 enter the Web3 governance space? What are the most persistent misconceptions that you see them bringing into the space?
Uh, I think there's there's often a misunderstanding of what, I guess, decentralization is or what it's for. I think folks come into the space will often see it as this nebulous end that they're chasing, as opposed to a means to achieving specific ends. And so when we talk about decentralization, we're really talking about wanting to achieve a handful of qualities, decentralization, and the mechanisms that we use to achieve it are really means to achieving things like censorship resistance, capture resistance, fault tolerance, um, and those are the things that we actually care about. We care about the application uh, being live when users want to interact with it. We care about users not being able to be deplatformed from it. Um, and I think, yeah, maybe the other way to think about this is that a lot of the value propositions of the Web3 space are these kind of threshold or fundamental basic features that you only really realize that you care about when they go away. Um, and so, um, yeah, make I guess like having realistic expectations about what the features that you're inheriting from Web3 are and why that's beneficial is a really key component to Web3 founders, Web3 communities being successful.
Well, it's a very thoughtful response. I liked what you said about thinking that you've achieved the end goal, where instead of thinking this is a way of accomplishing your next goal. I paraphrased, but is that pretty close to what you meant?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think that the succinct way to put this is decentralization is a means to some other ends, to achieving some
Yes.
other qualities that you want in your application.
Right, right. Yeah, it's not, but I do think that decentralization or Web3 and blockchain, crypto, whatever word we use, it sometimes reminds me more of a religion than a technology. And I feel like when we get there, it doesn't, we're not being practical anymore. So seeing it, I think what you're saying is like we have to see it as the technology that it is and a means to an end, and not we found our we found enlightenment. I'll put it that way.
Right. Well, so that's funny that you mentioned religion. I've had a very like I don't know. My relationship with this has kind of oscillated in terms of Web3, like at times being very uh, uh, I don't know, fed up with it, and other times being very glad of it. And I think I've reached a much healthier, stable point on it now, where I recognize that yeah, almost the pseudo religious uh, quality to Web3 is ultimately a very efficient way of like packaging this memeplex, right? This collection of different memes that instill again that combination of values that we wrap up and call decentralization. And so I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing. It's again, religions are incredibly efficient ways of
Yes,
passing along
communication. Yep.
memes, and so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that quasi-religious element to Web3, I think, has achieved that goal really well.
You have a fascinating way of thinking. You're clearly a deep thinker, Oren. So it's really exciting to hear hear how these thoughts are put together. You don't ever have the expected response. So I never know what you're going to say next, which is cool.
Yeah, cheers.
So tell us, what is next? What do you think is coming in DAOs, in decentralization, in Zodiac, anywhere? And how? What do you want to invite people to get involved with?
Yeah, I've been thrilled, obviously somewhat self-servingly, but also just because it's a set of values that I care about, thrilled at the enthusiasm around privacy and privacy-related technologies, applications, communities over the last really like 6 to 8 months. There's just been this huge resurgence of people caring about privacy as a thing. Um, and so, yeah, I guess I would encourage people to ride that wave, right? Like to jump on and yeah, find projects that excite you if you're now starting to discover or rediscover privacy-related technology, then yeah, dive in. There's heaps of really interesting ones. Enclave is obviously one, but beyond that, obviously the Zcash ecosystem is really, really cool. Railgun, privacy pools, session messenger app. There's yeah, a huge ecosystem of very, very cool privacy-related projects that I think are doing fundamentally useful and valuable work for both the Web3 space as well as just humanity in general. So I'd encourage people to jump into that.
How can people follow along with what you're thinking about today?
Yeah, I tweet sporadically, so maybe on Twitter at Auryn_Macmillan. Marv, our comms lead at Gnosis Guild, does a much better job of coherently packaging our thoughts on the Gnosis Guild blog and on the Enclave blog. So maybe follow along there as well. Yeah.
All right, and final question, where do you expect to be in a couple years?
Ooh. Hopefully still chugging along with Gnosis Guild, and hopefully we have Enclave in a really nice spot, have Zodiac in a really nice spot. The immediate focus for us is getting both to production readiness. Well, I guess Zodiac has been in production for many years, but it's in the process of redefining itself and kind of relaunching. So that'll be exciting. Look out for that in kind of early January. And then Enclave is looking to launch into production in probably March. And so, yeah, I guess I haven't thought too much about the preceding the years following. My focus has been very immediate on getting those two things to production and giving them the best chance to still exist and be thriving a handful of years out from now.
Amazing. Well, I encourage our listeners and watchers to follow Gnosis Guild and look out for that in January. Those updates in January. Can't wait to see what you do next, and we'll be watching. Thank you, Auryn.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you for joining us.
Yeah, cheers. This has been a lot of fun.